Hello, this is Faith and Books. How are you doing? I'm going to try and make this pretty quick. It is the morning of December 31st, 2022. So happy New Year to everybody. I'm on my way to the grocery store. Can you see how foggy it is out? It's super foggy out. Can you see it? I don't know if it comes out in the camera. Anyway, it's super foggy out. It's unseasonably warm, but then last week at this time, it was really, really cold. It was like 8 degrees or something crazy like that. So I want to talk about 3 things quickly. So the first one is going to be a very cursory review of 2022 for me, which is not an especially great reading year, but it did have some highlights. I'm going to talk about that. Then I have a Hornblower giveaway. And then, what was the last thing? Oh, I read a science fiction book that I actually enjoyed. Even though it was kind of dark and science fiction isn't my thing, I really thought this was a pretty well done story. So anyway, so those are my 3 things for today. So first of all, a review of last year, or this past year. I only read about 45 books, I think, but I sort of stopped keeping records because I stopped logging into a Goodreads. And anyway, Goodreads, I would forget to put books up on Goodreads anyway. So like even last year when I was trying to be conscientious, I left a couple off. So it's never quite accurate. But let's see, I started out the year doing really well because I was participating in Mark at Book Time with Elvis's Africa Cup read, and that was really fun. I wasn't able to join in on his World Cup, but next time he has one of those reading challenges, I'm going to try and join in because it's really fun. I read a lot of interesting books from Africa that I never would have read before, and the best one that I read was actually a nonfiction. It was a memoir by a woman who eventually became a professor at the University of Morocco, but it was called Dreams of Trespass, something like Memoirs of a Harem Girlhood or something like that. She grew up in a harem in the mid 20th century, and she was recalling what life was like. It was just absolutely fascinating, extremely well written. I actually gave that away to my friend Rena. So Rena, do you still have that book? Yeah, that was a good book. And then for Regency, I remember I really loved Belinda, and now I've read 3 books. I'm going to lock the door here so people are walking around. I've read 3 books by Maria Edgeworth, and Belinda is, I think, her most famous maybe, and it's her longest. It's supposed to be a really long book, but it didn't feel long. It didn't take me that long to read it, I don't think. Maybe like 5 weeks or something. And while juggling other things too. But it was a really interesting book. It's like a predecessor to Jane Austen, so you could see where Jane Austen got some of her themes. And it had an interracial relationship that was treated as normal. Now apparently in later editions they took that part out, but this was the original one. So it really gave you a look into the Regency world. And the characterization was not good. It was kind of flat, but other than that, I found it an extremely interesting read. So that was a highlight. And then this year, I listened to 2 Dickens books. I listened to David Copperfield, which I'm very familiar with. I've read several times, and that earlier in the year. And then I just finished listening to Pickwick Papers. So that's unusual. I don't usually do 2 Dickens in a year, so that's good. But the biggest defeat came with March of the Mammoths. I was in a reading group to read Don Quixote, which also was going to be a reread for me. I have read that. And that's when life got crazy, because what happened was my daughter had been off work on maternity leave with her new baby, who was born January 14th, and she went back to work, and I was taking care of the kids. And it just took all my energy, and I just really slowed down with reading. I was just too tired by the end of the day to read very much. So what happened with Don Quixote, I was really into it. I read the first half of it, and then I was into the second volume, and the app I was listening to it on LibriVox, and the app stopped working, or something weird and technical happened where I could not get through this one chapter. And so I kept putting it off, and I was going to ask people to help me, or how do I, I just didn't know how to deal with it, and I kept putting it off, and then I just started forgetting about it, and March was over, and I just moved on to other things. I was going to read it all the rest of the year. I kept telling myself I'll read it in December so that I have it finished, and I just didn't get to it. So I'm truly sad about that. I did not mean to DNF Don Quixote. It just sort of happened, and I never got the traction to get back on again. But a couple of big DNFs that I did was I tried Les Miserables, and I read about 40% of it, which it is a chunkster. So reading 40% of Les Miserables is like the equivalent of reading another kind of long book. But I decided I really didn't like Victor Hugo. And that technically was a reread too, but I think when I read it before, when I was younger, it must have been an edited version, because I did not remember all his bombastic, egotistical, political rantings about politics in France after Napoleon. And he just goes on for pages and pages and pages, and he just struck me as the most obnoxious person. So, just so full of himself. And so I couldn't stand him. So I gave up on Les Miserables. So that was bad, but that's a classic, but I just didn't like him. I need to read the edited version. And then I read about a third of Walden and gave up on that because I didn't like Henry David Thoreau. I didn't want to hear him spouting off anymore. So what else did I had in July, I did Sustainability July, and a couple of people participated. Thank you very much. You know who you are. I think I'm going to do it again this year because I really am so interested in the topic of sustainability. I think it's really, really important, and more people need to wake up and take it seriously. And so I'm willing to be evangelical about it. So I think I'm going to try and do that again for July. That was hard though because I had bad cataracts. They were getting worse, and then at the beginning of July is when I actually had cataract surgery, and I had it on both eyes, and then they had to recover. So that really slowed me down. First of all, having cataracts, and then having surgery, I think that really slowed me down. And then I only read one Shakespeare. I read Coriolanus, and I loved that. Oh, that was so good. That was a really intriguing play. And it's one of those plays they hardly ever talk about, but it's definitely worthwhile reading. And then let's see. And then I had a good Victober. I'm trying to remember. I read Scenes of Clerical Life, or whatever the title is. I always mangle it, by George Eliot, and truly enjoyed that. And I reread Mary Barton. I listened to Mary Barton. That was another reread. I had so many rereads. Like I reread Agatha Christie's autobiography. Just a ton of rereading went on this year. And then what else did I read? And then Pickwick Papers. But I know I read some other Victorian. I can't remember what I read for Victober, but I had a good Victober. And then Nonfiction November, the highlight of that was 2 Years Before the Mast. I thought that was a really fascinating book. And that kind of primed me for Hornblower. So that'll be a good segue. So what I did was, inspired by Mark Richardson, who's co-hosting the Hornblower 2023 read-along, I saw that he had this book called The Hornblower Companion. I don't know if this is quite the same one. So I went to Thrift Books and I bought, well, there were two listed. They only had two, I believe. And they're very different formats, and they even had different titles. So I got them in the mail yesterday, and I'm going to keep this one because of my bad eyes. This is bigger, and the print is spaced better for me. And it's neat. The first half of it are maps and like discussions of the geographical places that the different ships that Hornblower is on go to, and also about the ships themselves. So with all these nice maps and everything. So I really like that. And then the second half of it is C.S. Forster's notes on when he was writing the series and how he got inspiration for the different plots and that kind of thing. So there you can see, did he write it out in longhand? That's amazing. Yeah, it's an example of the author's original manuscript. So let me turn off my engine here. I have a hybrid, and when it clicks on the engine, then I want to spread exhaust. So anyway, but this is just him remembering his inspiration. So it's a neat book, and I'm glad I got it. This is the same thing, it turns out. But it is a little paperback, and you can see the paper's yellowed, and the print is much tinier. That's not good for my eyes. However, since I don't need 2 of these, I'm giving this away for free. So if you want this book, it'll be free, and get your magnifying glass, or maybe you don't care, maybe you have good eyes. But anyone who wants a free copy of the Hornblower Companion, just put it in the comments, and I will, if there's just one person who wants it, you'll get it. If there's more than one person who wants it, I will pick your name out of a hat, and then, I don't know, maybe I will give you my cell number and you can text me your address or something like that. We'll figure it out. So if you want this copy of the Hornblower Companion by C.S. Forster, and you're joining in on the Hornblower 2023, please let me know and you can have it. Okay? All right, so that's the giveaway. And then the last thing I was going to say is, so I'm in Sean Standfast's Fated Pages book club, and for December we read The Word for World is Forest by Ursula Le Guin. It was really out of my lane. I don't read science fiction very often at all, but I want to like it because my husband likes it so much. He likes fantasy and science fiction, and I just have never got warmed up to it. I'll read it, I'll try it, and I'll go, oh, okay, but I'm just not drawn to it. But I enjoyed this book. Now, it was a dark book. It was talking about real deep issues about colonialism and exploitation and bigotry and what's the word I want? Just devastating the world ecologically, so that we have to go to another planet to get resources because we've ruined this planet. And it had there were just a lot of thought-provoking things going on in this book. It was multi-layered. There was a lot going on. So I enjoyed it. Ursula Le Guin, I think, writes very well. She writes in a very straightforward way, and while the characters are pretty well drawn, there's not a whole lot of nuance. I mean, you really knew the point she was trying to get across. It was very clear. But I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. 5 for me is brilliant. 4 is I would recommend to others. And so, yeah, I would recommend this. And apparently it's in a series, the Hainish cycle or something like that. I forget now what the series is. And so the end of the book does not have any real resolution. It just kind of stops. And it's dark, and it's very 1970s. I knew that it seemed very 1970s to me, and I looked it up, and it was published in 1972. So it's like there's some sexual stuff and just some attitudes that really, it's not, I mean, it's clean and everything, but there is some references, and it just struck me as very 1970s. So I was right about that. So anyway, I at first, when I was first starting to read it, I had to get over my prejudice, and I wasn't really in the mood because it was Christmas and I wanted Christmassy things, and it was not Christmassy. But after Christmas, when I finished reading it, I really appreciated it. So yeah, so 2 thumbs up for Ursula Le Guin's The Word for World is Forest. It was a good book. All right, so that is it. I am off to the grocery store. I got to figure out what we're going to eat for dinner tomorrow night. And also, I want to do like hors d'oeuvres or something for people who might want to stay up. I am not going to stay up, I don't think. I think last year, though, I did stay up reading. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. All right, so take care. And if you want that Hornblower book, please let me know. Somebody's stopping and getting out, so maybe I shouldn't be here. Somebody who looks like he works for this park. All right. Well, I will talk to you later. Take care. Hope you're doing well. Happy New Year. Bye.